Hi, everyone. I am so excited about today. I'm excited about every Sunday because I really love talking to people about their stories. We're coming up on a year now, almost a year of doing parables, and we believe that hearing each other's stories is really good for us as we develop empathy and compassion, and we just love getting to know each other better. So Anna and I have had a few conversations about her life, and I'm always wanting more. So I'm really excited that she is here. This is Anna Gray. For those of you who don't know her, say hi to Anna. And it's a brave thing to sit in that seat. So I know that you're going to give her a lot of support and compassion today. And so let's start with the basics, Anna, which is tell us what you'd like to share about your growing up years.
Okay. So I grew up in Flint, Michigan, and later Tempe, Arizona. I was born in Flint in 1947, and my dad had come home from the war he had a brain injury that caused an early onset of some different issues. So but my dad never complained. He worked. He was just the kind of guy everybody enjoyed being around. And then I had this mother that was a force of nature. And I also had a Greek grandfather that lived with us the whole time we grew up. And so we just had an amazing family life. I had two brothers and a sister. My parents had a restaurant, and across the street, my grandfather had a restaurant. So we grew up in that environment, but we also had a 1-acre garden. My mother went back to school to get her degree. Lots of activity in our family, so I learned about hard work, but I am so grateful to my family. I had a wonderful childhood, and I was really fortunate to have all the opportunities to play outside, go to the lake, work in the restaurant. And so that's basically how it was. My family also thought about other people and on a regular basis fed people a meal. We had relatives from Greece staying with us for weeks at a time when they came over and getting on their feet. So it was always a full house. So it was just a wonderful time. It was great.
Didn't you tell me that it wasn't unusual for your mom to bring strangers home for dinner?
Yes, strangers, with people with kids. We always had a full table. And so, we learned early on just this sharing with others. It was just commonplace in my family. So that was a big lesson early on for all of us, was to think about other people, not just ourselves.
Yeah, that's really informed
Yes.
who you are. So tell us a little bit about your spouse and your children.
Okay. So my first marriage, my husband had gone to Vietnam, and that was really a rough time for everyone. But we had a divorce, and I'll probably tell you a little bit about that later. But my second husband, Randy, he is just an amazing guy. We've been married 43 years. That doesn't sound right when I say it. 43 years. We have 2 adult children. We have 3 adult grandchildren. We have a great-grandchild. She's going to be in 7th grade this year, so that blows me away. I just saw her a few weeks ago, and she's just darling. So we just have wonderful family members. We're very fortunate.
I had the privilege of being with Anna and Randy when they renewed their vows on Valentine's Day at Little Toe Creek
Yes.
Pub and Brewery. And it was, I didn't tell you this part that I was going to say this, Anna, but the way that you two looked at each other, it was so sweet. It was like 2 kids had run away and eloped and were getting married, and it was just precious.
It
So
felt that way,
love.
and being at the pub, and it was wonderful, and I loved how everybody pitched in to make that a wonderful event. So that was fun.
It was
Yeah,
fun. It was
it
fun
was.
to see your love in that way. So you've talked a little bit about your growing up family and the family that you have built. You mentioned a little bit of your heritage, being from Greece.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your faith background? Because I know that's part of it too.
Yes. So I was born and baptized in the Greek Orthodox Church in Flint, Michigan. And my mother was first generation in this country. And of course, having my Greek grandfather live with us, it was a very strong faith background. And we attended a Greek Orthodox church, and there was no English spoken because basically everybody was from the old country in those days. And so I grew up with that. But as I became an adult and actually worked and lived all over the country, I've attended a lot of different churches. I once had a priest tell me that the devil wants you to stay home, and we know that God wants us to come. So, you know, you don't find a Greek Orthodox church on every street corner. So I attended church I've gone to a lot of different churches with a lot of people, and I'm glad because I've learned about a lot of things. But so now I can safely say I'm Greek Orthodox and Methodist. And I go for usually what's called Pascha, Greek Easter. I do go up to Santa Fe to St. Elias. It's like a whole week. And so it's kind of how I grew up. But yes, so I'm Methodist also now.
We're glad that you are. And one of the things that drew you to Morning Star, if I'm correct, was the service aspect, right? The serving of people who are hungry
Yes.
in particular. Can you tell us a little bit about your involvement with the food pantry?
Yes, so actually I think it's been 8 or 9 years ago, we moved we got a house in town, so we had a second home here. We have a home up by Hillsboro. So when we came into town, I actually started volunteering here at the pantry, and that was quite different then, but Krista was here then, and by the way, Stuart was also involved with the church, so I knew him. And then after I started volunteering at the pantry, I started coming to church here, and I feel like I align with the goals of the church and the alleviation of suffering and inclusion, and all of those things really align with my belief system. So I feel really like this fits perfectly in with who I am. And who I am as a child of God, too.
So you were away for a little bit, the pandemic happened, and then when you came back, you jumped right into the lighthouse,
Yes,
right?
when I came back, a year and a half ago on New Year's Eve, I had a stroke. And we were living out in the middle, 80 miles from town at our other house. And we still had the house here. It was being leased out. So after I left the hospital, we started moving back into town one laundry basket at a time because I wasn't really up to a big move. And as I kind of got myself together again, I started taking one thing on at a time. And actually, I came in and I came in to see about the pantry, and I walked in the door, and there was Krista. So I felt like I was home. And then, after I started with the pantry, then I started coming to church again. And so I've just felt so comfortable. And then there was Stuart. The first time I came to church, there was Stuart. So it's like yes, I'm back. So it was wonderful.
And you serve on Tuesdays and on Saturdays with
Yes.
the pantry. And
Yes,
both
I do.
aspects, which is really
Absolutely.
great. Well, this is your place. You are home, and we're so glad
Yes.
that you are. I know that people want to hear a little bit more about your experiences that have been formative for you, and you are a teacher.
Yes.
Right? And there's so many out here who have
Yes.
spent years teaching. Can you tell a little bit about the various places that you have served and what you've learned?
Yes, well, so in my current marriage, it was kind of like being in the military. My husband worked for Department of Agriculture, so I was a teacher. I'm retired now, but he would get an opportunity to transfer to somewhere, and then I would have to, you, as a teacher, you don't leave mid-school year. You stay to the end. So if he left early, I would stay till school was out and meet the Packers, move, and then the new state, in order to get a teaching license, I would have to take all the tests again. And usually I got my job in August when all of the other positions were filled and there was something open. So I have a lot of, I am early childhood through elementary. I've taught special ed, all areas of special ed. English as a second language. I've taught from preschool to high school. And so I had a lot of opportunities. I've worked in 6 states and Washington, D.C. And so I've taught a lot of different things and always amazing experiences. I never got bored, I can tell you that. One thing I did was I always wanted to teach on the Navajo Reservation, so I was able to do that. My husband worked in Department of Agriculture there as a field agent, so I worked there. I worked on the Tohono O'odham Reservation, which is 60 miles from Tucson on the border of Mexico. And then I actually worked at the Smithsonian in the basement. They had an early childhood program for people who worked at the Smithsonian, so that also was wonderful. So I've had a lot of experiences, and I've noticed as we listen to other people's stories, we have a lot of teachers in this congregation, so.
I was just struck with how many times you had to take the certification test. And do you remember how you described that to me?
Well, the first time I took it, taking tests is no fun, right? But, and you have to it's like a 3-hour test for each area you want to be certified in. So first of all, you've got general education, that's 3 hours. And then if you want to be in special ed or early childhood or anything else, each of those is another 3-hour test. Now, you don't take them all in the same day. But the first time I took the test, that was in Arizona, I was pretty freaked out, like, oh my gosh. Well, the next time I had to take it, I just told myself, this is a game. You just have to pass, right? Which, once you kind of get the hang of it, it's not so bad. So, yeah, I think I have taken a teacher test for all of those 6 states that I've worked in. So, that was always interesting. But like I said, I was able to pass that on to my kids that I taught later. This is a game, so we want to do our best. So don't be nervous, because it really is, right? You just want to do your best. So that was my experience.
And it says something about your mindset, too. 'Cause I don't know if you heard yourself or if you caught it earlier, but she said, I've had a lot of opportunities. She didn't say challenges. She said opportunities. And I hear that. I hear that in the way that you speak. Tell them about the program at the Smithsonian, because I found this so fascinating. Tell them about the connection with the students and then what you did with the exhibits.
So at the Smithsonian, there's numerous Smithsonian museums, but the early childhood program was available to anybody who worked for any of the Smithsonians. And usually they were, a lot of the people were professorial or had a lot of knowledge about different areas. So we had some very precocious children. Part of the program was like any early childhood program, with blocks and story time and naps. But a big part of the program was every day we went into the museum and did a lesson on something in the museum. And if you think of the Smithsonian, the wide variety of things, it was endless. So it was just a wonderful program and a great opportunity, because usually in schools you have to take a field trip to go to something like that. But every day we had that opportunity to take our little kids in and do a lesson. So it was just a great opportunity.
That's right.
My word.
I got a little bit jealous about that. To have a class in one of the Smithsonians and to have access to that and the precocious kids, it just sounds like a lot of fun.
It
And
was.
sounds like
It
you were
was.
well suited.
Yeah,
to
we
that.
enjoyed it. Yeah.
Well, you have so many wonderful stories, Anna, and we cannot get to them all, but I think we should have her again soon. We wanted to make sure that we had time to talk about an experience that was really formative for your
Yes.
faith. So are you ready to speak to
Yes,
that?
I am. So this was important to me to tell because I told you that my family had a lot to do with how I feel about helping other people, seeing other people. But the other experience as a young woman that I had just finished getting my teaching degree, and my husband was back from Vietnam, and I had my dream job in Tempe Elementary in Tempe, Arizona, teaching multiply handicapped children. And after about 3 years there, my mother, my family is living in California, my mother was very ill with cancer. And so at the end of that year, the last day of teaching, my husband and my daughter and I left to go help take care of my mother. And my sister was there. She was taking care of Mom, and she really needed help. So we went not knowing what would happen, what the future was. And so my mom, as we say in the Greek Orthodox Church, she fell asleep in the arms of the Lord. So it was very devastating for our family. As I said, she was a force of nature. Something happened with my family, and I will just say my family basically fell apart after she passed away. And my father, who I just loved dearly, did not find his voice at that time. And so we basically left the home with some pressure from family members. And at some point, my marriage, under that stress and probably other things, my marriage fell apart. And so we split up. And after a series of events, my daughter and I were homeless. And so this was about somewhere around 50 years ago. I was 28 and my daughter was 8. I'd done my dream job and now I'm homeless. I had a friend or an acquaintance who said I could put a tent on his property in Nevada City, California. And I did. I went and bought a tent. I didn't have much money left and I didn't have resources. So now we're living in a tent on this property about 2 miles from town, down a dirt road. And actually it was probably not the best thing because we lost resources and we didn't know anyone there. My sister was supportive, but she lived 60 miles away in Sacramento, my younger sister. At one point she brought us some cases of what you would call MREs or military food. They have it in summer camp. They're prepared meals in cans and stuff. Her boyfriend had gone to summer camp and with the National Guard. That's what we were eating. We actually didn't even have a means to cook food. So I had a little car, which wasn't working well. I took it into an auto shop, and I met somebody there, a California highway patrolman, who was having his car worked on, and he talked to me, and as you can imagine, in a way, you're kind of trying to be invisible when you're in a situation like this, but he queried me, and I know he saw what was happening. And so then when I went back to Nevada City from the car auto shop, I decided I need to sell my car. I couldn't afford to maintain or put gas in it. And I had another friend who came and bought it. I signed it off, and I never saw him again, and he didn't pay me. So now I have no car. I didn't ask for help because in those days, I would say that being a parent living in a tent with a child homeless was actually considered negligence. And I was afraid that I would lose my daughter to the system. So really, I kept a stiff upper lip. But at some point, my daughter got to go to a slumber party. And I walked her into town. And after I left her, I called my sister, who was just going to work on the night shift in Sacramento. And I actually was, I would hit the bottom. And my sister said she would come out when she finished working to be with me. And as I walked back to the tent in the dark, I really felt that I couldn't go on. And so I just felt totally out of hope. I think hope is believing things can get better or believing that you can make things better. I really no longer had hope. So as I walked down this dirt road in the dark, by the way, if I cry, it actually is tears of joy, so don't. A car was coming up behind me, and I saw the headlights. And it was the highway patrolman I'd met at the auto shop, and he had come to check on me. And I do believe in divine intervention in this way. I believe we are God's messengers, angels on this earth to do divine intervention for others. And so he went with me to the tent. He took me to the tent, and he stayed with me until my sister came at midnight, and he told her they can't stay here anymore. Now, my sister is my younger sister, and she was working and sleeping on the floor of her girlfriend's house. So it's not like she had resources, but she waited with me till morning. We picked up my daughter and our few possessions, and we went into Sacramento. I'd had offers of jobs in Nevada City, but the problem was I couldn't allow I couldn't have a job and have a daughter and be homeless and have her going to a tent or something. So we went to Sacramento. Somebody loaned me $100, and I got a little dumpy apartment at the bottom of a Victorian. And at that point, got a job at the city parking lots, working the night shift. I rode a bike, and my sister helped when she got off work, stayed with my daughter. And I will say that, it was still a long climb up, but I had hope again. So I just want to say praise the Lord and praise all the people that, have his message. And I will say that I've been paying it forward, paying that back my whole life, because we look around and we see homeless people, we see women and children, somebody's hungry, whatever you see, an older person that needs a kind word. And if we're really looking, we can do something, even just praying for that person or blessing them. So that's what my life, I think, has been all about. So this, being here at church, being at the pantry, being around all the wonderful people here who model these types of things, it just fits in with me, and I feel blessed to be here and with all of you. So that's my story. By the way, I have one thing to add. The day I got this little apartment, I found not one of those sash windows had a lock on it. And I called my father, who I hadn't talked to for over a year, and he came into town, and we were reunited. And it's one of the most wonderful moments of my life, because he had found his voice. It wasn't that he didn't want to see me. It's just family matters. And so I just blessed that day. I was so fortunate to have my dad in my life again. So now I'm really done.
I told you it was an amazing story. Tonight, there's so much there. I'm sure that you all have questions and statements that you want to make. John, go ahead.
I didn't understand how you met your husband. Was he the highway patrolman?
Oh, that
Now-
would have been a good story.
Okay, I didn't tell you that part.
Great
So
story. Wait, let me repeat the question for people at home. The question is, how did you meet Randy? Right?
Yes. So after I moved into town to the Dumbier Victorian, my neighbors who were there going back to school, they had met my husband the year before. And a year later, they were backpacking with him with a favorite professor. So they introduced me. It was like a blind date dinner at their house. And actually, 3 months later, we got married. That was it. And he's a lovely person, a caring person, and was a wonderful dad to my daughter. And a whole chain of things came after that were amazing. So that's how I met my husband.
That's a great question, John. Randy has the kindest eyes I've ever seen.
Oh,
He just has
he
the,
does.
he does.
He
You can
is.
just tell he's the kindest person with those blue eyes of his.
Yes.
They're really, really beautiful. Great question. Anything else? Go ahead, Steve. Do you remember the name of the highway patrolman?
You know, I actually don't, and I've thought about that because this week I've thought about all of that. You tend to not, you tuck those things away, and I don't. I can see him, but the other part of that is whatever happened in those days. A big part of that is forgiveness for anything that contributed to me getting there. So I just wanted to say forgiveness is also a big part of my life. So.
Steve is saying that he had an old buddy who was a patrolman in that area, right?
So let me say, at the time, he was retiring. He was retiring, and he was tall.
Big guy.
He was tall. But I mean, I often think how a lot of people have a negative view of law enforcement these days, and I have to say that he saved my life, and he really saw what kind of trouble we were in, and extended himself. So.
He did not judge you for it.
No, he did not judge me. He didn't
Right.
say, wow, what's she doing there with this kid? Right. No, not at all. He had compassion.
Yeah, it's a
That's
beautiful
very
story.
good. It's true.
It's a very beautiful story. What else? Yeah, Christy.
So, the first time I met Linda, she was mopping the floor for the lighthouse. I can't tell you if we've ever mopped that floor before. Down here, and then she went all the way in the back and just cleaned everything. And I thought, okay, I got to get to know this lady because she is amazing. Nobody stops to mop the floor. We just had a lot of people there that day. And so to me, you're kind of what Amy's talking about in the sermon as being the light of the world to other people. Not just paying it forward, but actually being kind of that light out there, like you said, with God's talking through you. You're God's messenger. You're the light to people, the lighthouse, the person that you are. You know that a lot of my life is music, and one of the things that the Newsboys, a Christian rock group, they sing about is changing the world in tiny ways. And one thing they say is it's a prayer in an empty room, little things we do when nobody's around, a hand reaching out to a heart in doubt. It's the smallest spark that can light the dark.
Oh, that's lovely.
That man was that spark to you. That
Yes,
light to you.
yes.
And you're that light now to other people. And I just think it's awesome what God can do with that.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank
She's
you.
saying that Anna is the light of the world as Jesus calls us to be, and that is very, very true. Mopping the floor, it's a thankless job, but but it makes a big difference. And just seeing what needs to be done and doing it is a huge part of being the light.
Oh,
Yeah, that's beautiful, Christy. And check out the Newsboys, too. If you haven't listened to them in a while, their stuff is always good. It's classic. Anything else as we close today? Okay. Have you eaten at Tiffany's yet?
I don't.
It's a Greek
Oh, yes,
restaurant.
I've eaten at Tiffany's. Yes, yes. So,
That's good.
oh, absolutely. It is. It's great. So when I grew up, my grandfather, after he retired, did all the cooking. My mom went back to school. And so in those days, in the 50s, you didn't eat Greek food out. Nobody wanted ethnic food. It was good old American hamburgers and grilled cheese and whatever. So the restaurants my family had were not Greek food, but we ate Greek at home.
That's great. And Tiffany's is good.
Yes, yes.
So I saw Steve and then Joyce.
Yes, Afghani stuff.
I don't know what that means, Steve. Oh, thank you. Okay, good. And Joyce.
I just want to say that I did not know him before, and we met at the food pantry, and then we have become very, very good friends. We swim a lot, but all of her spiritual really has helped me
Yeah.
along the way as well. And so not only does the food pantry feed people, but they also get you some great friendships.
That's right.
Absolutely.
No, that's
absolutely.
a really good point. When we serve
That
together,
is.
we form really important friendships. I'm so glad to hear that about you two.
Yes.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and likewise, Joyce.
Yeah.
Yes, and when you come to the pantry, people don't, they are there to help people, and it's so positive, because we used to say when I taught, sometimes you went to the teacher's room to get your daily dose of negative, only because sometimes people tell stories
No,
and this
sure,
and that.
sure.
But so you want to always go where you're getting that positive lifts you up and everyone else.
It's good. That's good, Joyce.
Yes,
That's good,
absolutely.
Anna. Thank you. Well, let's give Anna a round of applause for sharing her story.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll start church in about 13 minutes.
Thank you, Pastor Amy. It's like, oh my gosh. Oh. Oh, that bit today, talking about judging, right? And actually, the one thing I didn't say is we don't realize in because I've seen that.
Texted Sarah
That insecurity
if she was still at home to bring some water.
gives.
Take your stuff out to your car and leave it in your car.
Yeah, thank